and welcome back, everybody, to the Unfounded podcast. My name is Christopher Turner, and I am your host. Happy 4th of July. I am coming to you on the 4th of July. Thought I'd sit down here. It's been a month or two since I got the last episode out, and I wanted to jump on here. I thought this was a fitting day to produce another podcast for you. A couple of updates for the show. I know that it's been a little bit of time since I brought the last episode out. I appreciate all of you for the support that you've shown over the last couple months, couple years, however long you've been following the show. I know that the episodes have been sporadic. I know that I've said it was going to be more consistent many times before. And I want you to know that the reason that I have said that is because that is my complete and utter intention for this show. I have just been in the process of figuring out how to do this myself. One of the cool things about this show, and one of the things I hope you appreciate, is everything that you see is produced by me, right? Everything that you hear comes from my head. There is nobody else behind the scenes doing any of this, as a matter of fact, which is partially why it takes sometimes so long to get episodes to you, or you see such long breaks in between, because that's incredibly demanding. Many of you may follow other podcasts. I'm sure you've, at the very least, heard of Joe Rogan's podcast at this point, and his amazing producer, Jamie, right? Everybody that goes on the show is always giving Jamie compliments about how his ability to look up things live and find things on Google that people couldn't find for years, right? That is a huge help. Having somebody like that there to do the production side of the show while you're doing the podcast is something that is really helpful to the show production and something that I'm aiming for moving forward. So just because I have been the only one producing the show up until this point doesn't mean that's my intention moving forward. I do realize that now that I've gotten everything set up and I've gotten my idea solidified, it is time that I start looking for other people who would like to share in this journey or who would like to help me along the way. And that is one of the positions that I am looking to fill at some point. So that being said, my intention for the podcast is to make it a consistent weekly show at the very least. I have been, as you all know at this point, on a very long healing journey. And I think part of the reason why it may be confusing for some of the viewers in terms of the long breaks and how sporadic the show can be at times, because I've been going through this kind of undescribed healing process, and I've been very vague about that on purpose because I haven't really understood what I have been going through this entire time. A lot of this process, a lot of this podcast has been me talking out loud about what I think is going on with me, trying to figure out how to manage what I'm feeling and seeing in the world in a proper, positive way. And as I've done that, I have healed myself. I've had some extreme physical sickness for a very long time. I'd say my best guess would be around a decade, but it's been really intense for about the last 5 years. I've been going through extreme physical body pain. Stiffness is kind of doesn't really describe properly the kind of feeling I've had in my body. It's an extreme lethargy, tiredness, stiffness, like I said before, inflammation everywhere, right? So I've had kind of soreness in parts of my body I didn't even know could be sore, but without having any reason to be sore, right? I've had knots in places in my body that were extremely painful. My jaw has been locked and tight for years, so much so that I could barely open my mouth at periods of time. My throat, my vocal cords, I could barely speak at certain times because of how much inflammation there was in my neck and my jaw, so that at times I genuinely felt like I was being choked by something invisible. I'm saying all of these things so that you as a listener can start to identify exactly what I've been going through and what I mean by when I say healing. I am talking about the emotional side, but there has been a physical aspect that I'm trying to describe here that has been so intense, it has demanded all of my attention. And one of the topics for today, this is going to be a little different episode. I don't have any videos planned. I just wanted to get out and do kind of a traditional throwback episode like I used to do, where I don't have an idea. I just come on here and talk to you, see what comes of it. This process of healing is something that we all avoid unintentionally because of the way we define it, the way we think about it. My experience going through this for the last 10 years or so has the one thing that's stuck with me is that I there's this impatience that's constantly been there, this questioning of when is this pain going to be over, because I've also been getting very intentional downloads that the path that I'm walking is a path that I need to continue down, that the pain that I'm feeling is not pain that is permanent. It's only permanent if I believe it's permanent, that this pain is transient and it needs to move, and that if I move myself in the right ways, and that doesn't necessarily just mean physically move myself, but if I move my energy in the right ways, that pain, that sickness will move. And if I let it go, I will get it out of me. I will release it out of me. This is something coming for somebody watching right now, a description by one of your angels of how to do this process, right? You have to move the energy. And that doesn't just mean moving your physical body. It means finding those spots in you that are knotted, rotting. And instead of ignoring that pain and wishing it would go away, highlighting that pain, looking at it and asking why it's there, having a dialogue with it. It's like having a drag-out fight. We're going to settle it now, and there's only going to be one of us walking out of here. That's how you have to treat these things. And you clear everything off of your table. I have nothing else to do except for sit here and figure out why I have you in my body, how you got here, and how I get you out of here. This is the process. This is what I have been doing, right? Having these conversations like every hour of every day, continuously trying to find the next step forward so that pain can move, even just slightly some days. Sometimes it's an entire day of me just trying to move that thing an inch. But every day, if I do that, it moves, right? And so I've done that for years at this point, and I am now getting to a point where I can sit in front of you right now and not feel some of that tightness that I've had. You probably could hear that pop as I just moved my arm around. This is what I'm talking about. I'll try to show it to you. Can you hear that? Apologies if it's unpleasant, right? This is something I've hidden from all of you for the entire time I've done the podcast. This pain, right? Because for some reason I felt ashamed of it. Like the fact that I was in pain was somehow an indicator that I was wrong, that I was broken and fundamentally unusable. I guess that's why I did that, because right now, as I sit here showing you how much there is, I realized that there was nothing to be embarrassed of or ashamed of. It was very illogical why I would try to pretend like I wasn't in pain while I was doing this show, while I was doing these lives. And part of the reason why I've had to pull back so often is because I was dishonest about that. About how much pain I was in, trying to pretend like I felt good. How can you help other people when you don't feel good, right? This is a message for everybody in the world right now, because there's a whole lot of people, so many people, trying to help other people. And it's a beautiful gesture, right? On the surface. Where it becomes disconcerting is when we go down to the motivational level and we try to figure out why people want to help other people. Right? That's where we start to find the real truth. I find this through looking inside of myself, not at judging other people. Why did I want to help other people initially? What was the driving force? Well, it was kind of a similar thing to me hiding my pain from you. I wanted to convince you that I was something that knew the answers, right? That had already figured it out. Short of actually having some revelation, right? So short of actually having some grand defining moment that changes everything, that reveals the secrets of the universe, we try to pretend like we know those things, right? And I'm saying this not to be critical of anybody on the awakening journey. I'm describing my own journey, right? So I hope you know that I'm there with you in this. But part of that journey is us tricking ourselves into thinking that the reason that we are doing something is for altruistic reasons. And I promise you that at least initially, that's not why we go to help other people. That's not why we have this drive. That's not why you see so many people out on TikTok doing readings, right? Giving advice. If you think they're giving advice because they want to help you, you're deluding yourself. There may be some, and you can feel those people. When you encounter somebody that genuinely just wants to give you some gift, you know that because there's some kind of miraculous quality to it. There's a surprise to it, because the expectation of something being reciprocated, of you giving them something back, doesn't exist. So that you might even find yourself surprised when somebody genuinely does something out of the kindness of their heart, because immediately you will feel this compulsion to give them something back. But in that compulsion, you'll see the motivation of the other person, because whatever you're trying to give back to them isn't the point, right? A lot of times they might refuse that reciprocation, specifically because it will muddy the intent. It will make it seem like the reason they did that was so that you would return that favor. And you know what? At the end of the day, it's more important that you know that there's somebody out there that actually gives a shit about who you are, genuinely, that wants to do something simply to see you smile. That exists, and it's one of the most beautiful experiences human beings can have, is to see somebody go from a place of loneliness to experiencing joy. To be able to bring that into the world is the greatest gift for you. Right. If you truly understand why we do good things for other people, as a matter of fact, the secret is, in the best selfish way, it makes you feel good. It makes the other person feel good. And that's a rising of all boats there, right? That's a tide coming in. And it's honestly so simple in a world structured the way ours is today, to put a smile on somebody's face, right? All you have to do is be you. That's all you have to do. Share something that you really love, right? Find somebody that can't see something they love, right? There's so many of them around you right now. There's millions of them. Probably including yourself, right? Everybody's looking for something to bring them hope again, to bring them a little bit of joy, a little bit of satisfaction, a smile, right? You can do that by simply sharing what you love with the world. And that is so beautiful. I haven't known why I was doing any of this entire time. It's been so frustrating, tripping my way forward, hoping that what I'm making is valuable, praying that it is. That somebody will get that kind of enjoyment out of it. And I appreciate all of you so much, for enjoying this, because, it's vindicated those acts of faith for me. Yeah. Excuse me. That I know this is true. I know that the way you produce something worthwhile in the world is by not knowing where you're going. Something new, I mean, not just novel, but new, like not just truly unique. You have to go where somebody else hasn't gone yet. And by definition, that's an untrodden path. That's the wilderness, right? And so every step you take down that path is going to feel like a step closer to chaos, to destruction, to danger, to uncertainty, to loneliness. But I'm here to tell you that if you have the courage to continue one at a time, there's something down that path that all of that uncertainty obscures from you. And the price of admission is you. It's the risk of losing everything you are. In order for you to find something new, to bring that into the world, you have to venture into the wilderness and risk being destroyed by it. As a matter of fact, it probably will destroy whatever version of you walked into it to begin with. But by the end, the thing walking out is a different animal entirely. It's not the same thing. The thing we called before that we thought was human being, we now realize at the end of this journey wasn't even close. Was a disgrace to the term human being. Because what a human being is when it's actually realized fully is something that is so unbelievably powerful. It's awe-inspiring. It's beautiful. It's novel. It's dangerous, but in the right ways. It's unpredictable, uncontrollable, a force of nature in itself. This is what the human being is by default. What the human being has become is a degraded version, a highly degraded version of that. You can see this manifest on the world stage. The US elections are starting to pick up. And the chaos, there's so much confusion everywhere. Which is partially why I've pulled back over the last year or so, was to try to really understand the chaos instead of just contributing to it, right? As a content creator, while I do not want to filter what I say, I want to make sure that what I say is what I believe. And that sometimes takes time to figure out. Things as complicated as the war in Ukraine, the Israel-Hamas conflict, the presidential election, right? Immigration issues around the world, the conflicts with China and Taiwan. I mean, I can keep going on, right? All of the issues, myriad of issues going on through Africa right now. All of these things are they're problems that are so complicated. Our initial reaction out of being overwhelmed by that amount of complication is to simplify. By default, us as human beings, when we see something that's hyper complicated, what we try to do is simplify it, distill it down into its fundamental parts so that we can more readily understand it. But what I think has happened over history to the human being is we've slowly realized that distilling, while it can provide some fundamental principles, it doesn't actually do anything to describe the problem very well, right? If we try to simplify every problem we have in the world, what we'll get down to is a certain type of idealism that if we base policy off of and we enact, we end up becoming tyrannical, which is confusing because the motivation usually is to solve a problem. But when we simplify that problem, we miss some of the characteristics of it as we go down, so that when we get that final simplified version of it, it's not a good description of what's actually happening, right? So that when we formulate a solution based on that simplified identity, we end up creating more problems than we solve. And I do think that this is what's been going on the world stage for the last year or so, which is partially why there hasn't been as much content coming from me as well, along with the healing process. I want to understand what's going on, and really try to analyze it from all perspectives without simplifying it down to those idealisms, right? Because what you see from every side is that, regardless of what issue I just outlined, pick any of them, either side, what they're going to do is simplify that problem down into a version of reality that actually makes their side look correct, right? And oftentimes what will be there to indicate whether you agree with them or not is a certain type of principle that it's aligned with, right? Which is why it's been simplified. We simplify it down to whatever principle we think fits closest, and then we base the argument off of that principle. But that principle oftentimes is muddied, misused, manipulated to achieve some action in the end, right? So good examples would be, what's going on in Hamas, with Hamas and Israel, right? On both sides of the conflict. What you see, the Israeli side doing is kind of simplifying the conflict down into this, existential threat, and kind of disallowing any other conversation around that. What you have on the Hamas side is kind of a simplification down to almost like a religious principle, right? And so you have this religious principle confronting these two unmovable principles, kind of confronting each other, but they're not based on like actually aligning with the idea. It's a manipulation of the idea used to motivate people to believe that they are fighting on the good side. I hope that was enunciated well. It's really hard to describe what I'm getting right now. That what I think we're seeing around the world, regardless of the conflict, is people trying to use principles to justify their actions. But those principles are antithetical to the actions they are trying to justify, so that there's a muddying of the principle, a redefining of the principle, a bastardizing of what's true. And what's more disgusting about this is the people that are doing this are pretending like they're truth tellers. They're taking the message that's actually being sent out to the entire world right now of you need to be honest, and they're using that to manipulate the people that are actually trying to look for the truth. I'm going to do some episodes coming up on a couple of the figures I believe are doing this, because I've been paying attention to a couple of them. And like I said in the Cuomo Nikki Glaser episode, this is a time frame where truth is being asked, it is being demanded, the real truth, not this manipulated version of it. And I do believe it requires individuals like you and me to make the sacrifice to walk into that wilderness, regardless of the threat that's there, so that we can call out that incorrect definition, so we can identify the person that's hiding behind the truth, right? Because that is just as, if not worse, than lying itself. By default, it is a lie. It's a dirtier lie because it's a lie that's predicated on presenting itself as though it isn't. It's a lie within a lie. So, part of the message I wanted to bring in this episode, it's the July 4th episode, right, is hope, for a future based on principles that are unmuddied. The principles that the United States of America was based on are under attack and have been, I think, for a very long time. This will be another episode we go into. But I have a couple of them that I've been stewing on for a while, because I truly believe that what we're seeing happen in the United States is so much deeper and more complicated than we are aware of, that we are privy to. I believe we have a grand telling of the Cain and Abel story playing out on the world stage right now as we speak. That certain domestic actors let me put it as simply as I possibly can put it. I believe that there is a simple problem going on in the world right now. That what you see happening in much of the world with the chaos and the anger, specifically towards the West, is a manifestation of the spirit of Cain from the Cain and Abel story, right? So, and I've explained this before in the podcast for those of you that haven't heard it before, I apologize. But the Cain and Abel story is a very simple story, and it goes something like this. Cain and Abel were the sons of Adam and Eve. So they were the first human beings that were truly born of human beings, because Adam and Eve were created directly by God, right? So they're the first true human beings. And in the story, God directs both Cain and Abel to provide an offering. And he leaves them to decide what offering they will provide. And I do not remember which one it is, whether it's Cain or Abel that provides the lamb and the harvest. But one of them's a farmer and one of them's like a rancher, right? And Cain provides his offering, Abel provides his offering, and in the story it's very vague on like what specifically was different about these offerings. But in the story, God approves of Abel's offering and disapproves of Cain's offering. And when this happens, Cain becomes bitter and angry, and he starts to become resentful of Abel. And as the story progresses, what ends up happening is Cain allows this jealousy to burn inside of him to a degree that it actually justifies him or leads him to murder Abel, right? And God, of course, learns of this, and when he learns that Cain has murdered Abel, he casts him out of the land and basically damns him to be roaming the lands unprotected for the rest of time. And so what I see happening in this story, the reason why I bring it up is I believe that there are fundamental principles, the true unadulterated versions that have been distilled over time through the different religions. And these principles, when enacted in a society, provide stability for that society. In that stability is where all of the economic prosperity that we ascribe to a dominant civilization comes from, right? So it's not the technical aspects of the economy or the technical aspects of even the political system. It's the foundational principles that all of those are allowed to be built off of that defines the quality of each of them, right? And in the United States, what was so different about the United States than the other countries that came before it was its focus on enshrining principles into the founding documents so that there was a basis to build the institutions off of that would keep them aligned with each other and thus the society. Because in a society that is a bunch of different mini states combined together, you need to have stability, something that aligns all of them, principles, right? I believe this was successful. You can see this throughout history since the revolution. You see other countries enact similar ideas in their country and stability come out of that for a period of time as well. All the way until we have the introduction of another type of idea, another type of governance, right? And by definition, an anti-principled one. Right. So when you look at the introduction of the communist ideas in the Marxist manifesto, what it does by definition is tear down the principles of the systems that have come before it. Right. Specifically, it focused on capitalism, the economic side of the Western society and its dominance. As communism became a leading political movement in Russia and throughout the world, as it started to become dominant, the principles that it was based on started to manifest themselves obviously in the society, right? So many of the principles that, let's take one. So let's take just like the fundamental principle of liberty, right? Freedom in the United States, one of the most fundamental principles. In the communist system, you don't have a similar understanding of the value of sovereignty, of liberty, of freedom. So it's not enshrined or enacted in the founding documents of the original Soviet, I forget what it was, the Duma, or the original political system that was enacted during the October Revolution. I can't remember the exact terms, but the focus from a principled standpoint was not on liberty, on freedom. The focus was on other aspects of life, uniformity, efficiency, right? These kind of things, fairness, equality. These were the principles that were enacted at the fundamental of the society. So that fast forward, 40 years after the Russian Revolution, what we can start to see in the world, in these societies, in these institutions, what we can expect from those institutions is them to be a reflection of the principles of the system underlying it, right? And what happened with the Soviet systems? Right? They degraded. Not only did they degrade, they degraded everything. Every institution in the society crumbled by intention or by byproduct, right? Religious institutions, one of the strongest ones in the world, was completely torn down, right? The Orthodox Church, specifically to keep the principles from being the founding principles of communism from warring with the founding principles of Christianity, from which the Western system comes from, right? So there was a necessity to eliminate those systems because they disagreed fundamentally with where we were going with the country. Again, we're going to do a whole episode on this at some point. I did not expect to talk about this, but apparently I'm supposed to for some reason. As that system matured and as we saw that system become more and more corrupt, more and more inefficient, and obviously broken, what we can do then, retrospectively, is look at the principles the system was established on and extrapolate that when you enshrine those specific principles at the base of your society, what you produce is that, practically, corruption, right? A devaluing of the human being, right? Crushing of the human spirit, a lack of creativity. These are the kind of things that happen when you enshrine equality at the base of your system, oddly enough. When you enshrine freedom, liberty, justice, these kind of principles, what you get is a system that allows human flourishing as long as those principles are defended. Those principles have been under attack for at least the last 100 years, if not slightly more, since the inception of communism. And I truly believe that one of the things that has been happening, as I said earlier, as we got into this, a manifestation of the Cain spirit in the modern day, is that as those systems, those other ideas, ways of thinking, principled versions of those other versions of principles to produce a society on top of, as those failed in the most obvious ways around the world, thus justifying, right, the Western principles, there was a Cain-like igniting inside the human being that was supporting those systems, right? A jealousy, a bitterness. Why was my offering denied? Right? Because many of the people, all of the people that tried to establish these systems throughout the world, they believed that this would actually help something. Well, I don't believe Karl Marx believed that. I believe Karl Marx was a very specific type of villain that very intentionally knew what he was doing. I believe the people that followed those systems, that enacted it and actually made it a possibility, were tricked into thinking that this was a good way of living. So that as they tried to enact the systems, what they expected to see in their society was flourishing. And slowly what they saw was suffering. And it got so bad that they could not say it. Even if the system itself wasn't keeping them, which it was, from talking about how bad everything was getting, the people themselves, out of pure shock that of the lie, the gravity of the lie and the ramifications of that, I think out of shame, couldn't speak. And I think this happened all around the world in the 20th century. But in that shame, there's a choice. Do I admit that these principles maybe were flawed so that I can move forward as we thought happened with the fall of the Soviet Union? Or do I try to find a way to subvert those principles that have just proven themselves true? And what I believe has happened in most of the powerful Soviet bloc states, specifically Russia, is I believe there was an intentional, and there's proof of this, and we will, like I said, we'll get into this in an episode. I'll show you the videos on it, where people, KGB agents, talk about this process. There was a very intentional process through the 70s and the 80s, beginning around then, during the height of the Cold War, to subvert the principles of democracy in the Western world. And the way that you would go about doing that is through infiltrating the education system, starting to teach the other principles, starting to trick people into thinking that the principles the country are based off of aren't liberty, freedom, justice, pursuit of happiness, but are other ones like equality, right? If you know your principles didn't work and it blew up your entire country, how could you blow up another one? By tricking them into thinking the same thing. What do you see happening right now? Right? We are at war. The most fundamental type of war that we've ever seen in this world. A war of principle. What's actually true. And make no mistake about it, there are no nice guys out there. There are no friends to us in terms of this principled war. There are Cains and Abels. And all of the Cains are going to try to present themselves as if they're Abel. All of them are going to try to pretend like their principles are true. They're going to try to pretend so hard that it convinces you, so that you justify what they're saying, so that you enable their actions. And then at the end of the day, if that process goes far enough forward, so that you're responsible for what happens, not them. We are at war. in more ways than one. And this is why I speak to you on July the 4th. Because it is time that as Americans, we start to defend the principles that are true, that work practically in this world for the world again. Because if you grow up in a system for generations like the Soviet system, and you're taught the opposite of the truth, it's not that you're taught incorrectly, it's that you are intentionally lied to believe that everything that is actually true and good in the world isn't. The world that you live in after that is the most hyper-confusing place you could imagine. And you will justify tearing down the very thing that would save you. I do believe that's what's happening in China. I believe that's what's happening with Russia and any of the other countries that are starting to turn on the West, on the United States. That's not a loyalty question. It's not like, oh, you're abandoning us, I'm so bitter. No, it's a real concern for the disillusion, the misunderstanding of what the United States stands for. While it may be very confused right now about what it stands for on the national stage, it still fundamentally, at a document level, is principled. That's why it's under attack. That's why you see so many things being brought to the Supreme Court, because they're trying to change that. Because it is the most robust political system in the world that the world has ever seen. And figures that want power, that need it, those Cain spirits, they despise things like that kind of truth in the world. So they have to subvert it. Make no mistake about it. That is Putin's goal. That is Xi's goal. Subvert that confidence. What do you see in the world today? I saw a video the other day talking about the strike that happened in Russia, right? There was some missiles with cluster bombs that Ukraine launched at a military site in Russia. Those missiles were shot down, similar to the way that you saw in Israel with the Iron Dome. One of those missiles, as it was shot down, landed on a civilian area, specifically a beach. This is all coming from Russia, so we have to trust them with this information, the same way we have to trust Hamas with their information. But assuming they're not lying, right? That bomb landed on civilian people on a beach, right? Now, there's a lot of confusion with this story because it wasn't Russia, it was Crimea, which is the part that Russia annexed in 2014 and is still technically a war zone, right? So they tried to make it seem like Ukraine struck into Russia specifically to kill civilians, when in reality what they did is try to strike a military target in an active war zone. And because Russia is propagandizing their population so heavily, people actually believed it was safe to go to a beach in the middle of that war zone. And somehow they're blaming that on us, right? Seems a little confusing to me, but what's more confusing is when those stories come out that the U.S. attacked Russian civilians with cluster bomb munitions. And you read the comments, what I see is American citizens shitting on America, attacking America, and saying things that would make it seem as if the United States is the most evil thing in the world. Now, I by no means believe that the United States is only a positive force in the world. There are many bad actors that have infiltrated the system of government that we have. The difference is this system is specifically designed to keep those actors from being able to do anything, which is why you see them so angry when they're in positions of power, why they try to change all of the laws while they're in positions of power, because they only realize they can't do shit once they get in that position. The founding fathers were very, very privy to tyrannical people and how fucking tricky they are and how much they will tell you they don't want power until they get it. And then all of a sudden they're doing everything and determining everything about your life, right? They knew that. That's what they were leaving. That's what they were risking their lives to fight against. So if you think they would design a system to allow those kind of people to act in a system, to have power, you're deluding yourself. They did exactly the opposite. They specifically designed this system to catch those kind of actors in little fucking traps to where you couldn't see them. And as a matter of fact, they would highlight themselves intentionally once they tried to change the rules. So if you want to know who the bad actors are, look at who's trying to change the rules. Who's trying to change the rules? And that's on both sides. This isn't just a Democrat-Republican thing. Who's tried to change the system? I'm not talking through amendment, through the process that the Founding Fathers left us so that we could do it properly. That's very tough and takes a long, long time and a majority of the states to enact. Why did they make that so difficult? Because they knew that people that were tyrannical would try to change this at the flip of a dime, and they would just turn themselves into a king as soon as they possibly could, right? You as an American citizen should be so proud of the fact that actors like Donald Trump, actors like President Biden, actors like President Obama couldn't do more. That's the system working. Yet Russia and China are convincing you that the system's broken, that you need to tear it down. I'm telling you right now, the only way the United States falls is we tear it down, because they already know they can't. This is the truth, folks. It is time to stand up and defend what you believe in. Did you believe in the principles of this country? Did you benefit from the principles of this country your entire life? Then why the fuck are you tearing it down? Did you stand up and fight? Did you stand up and serve for those principles? Why the fuck are you tearing them down? People died for that. Thousands and thousands of men died so that you could have that fucking opinion, even if it's as wrong could fucking be. But one thing they didn't keep from you is the ability to be shamed, and you should be. If you are that ungrateful to turn on the flip of a fucking hat on the country that has provided the stability that gives you everything you've ever fucking had, including the mindset that you're a free individual human being. Do you know how valuable that is? And you're ready to throw that the fuck away as soon as Putin designs a good enough argument? As soon as Xi designs enough fucking cell phones? If you are turning on the United States, you should be ashamed of yourself. And I have no fucking qualms about saying that. You should be ashamed of yourself. And if you're feeling that right now, welcome to the fucking party. Now it's time to stand the fuck up and defend those principles you just disrespected. Because as a matter of fact, those principles are true in the United States. And even if you do talk shit about it, and even if you do try to tear it down, you're still a citizen. And you still deserve the right to see the truth and to speak it and to defend it and to be a member of the system. Find me a person in Russia that can do that. Find me a person in China that can do that. Find me a person in any other fucking country. Anyone. Look through the EU, look through Africa, look through the Asian continent. You won't find a single fucking one. Yet all of you seem so prone to criticize us as a fucking country as soon as we make a mistake. Why don't you stand up and lead the entire fucking world from a principled basis for the last 300 years and then come and talk to me about what mistakes we fucking made? You won't defend it, I will. Because I believe in it. I took that oath, and I intend to keep it. And I know there's a lot more people like me that know exactly the cost of what this is, and will not let people who don't disrespect it anymore. If you really believe that Russia and China have better systems, I invite you, and I mean this with every ounce of my fucking being, go there and try it. But you have to do one thing for me. Don't change what you believe if you go there. See if you can still be the same person. See if you can still be free. See if you can still speak your mind. Or whether you slowly see yourself start to shut up internally and support those people that are slowly pressing down on your fucking neck. And then you'll pretend like you like that. Like that's a better system. As they force you to go fight a fucking war that you never wanted to be a part of. Get ready. Because the world hasn't seen the United States defending itself yet. It's about to. It's about to learn a real big fucking lesson, I can promise you that. Anyway. Happy 4th of July. A lot of energy coming through today. Apologies if it was too much for any of you. If it was, then not your message, right? I hope it was invigorating. I hope it inspires you to stand up for the country that you live in, to believe in it once again, and to know that it's never stopped being what it was. There's just a lot of Cains out there trying to manipulate us into thinking that the offerings we're making are not proper. And while I do not believe, like I said before, the United States is above criticism, as a matter of fact, it deserves to be criticized as much, if not more, than any other system because it prescribes itself to be honest. When it isn't honest, it needs to be called out. It needs to, as harsh and as quick as possible, because it is antithetical to the system itself. So it's a practical problem. We need that. We need the world to tell us when we're fucking up. It's not that you're above criticism. We don't need the world to try to tear down what we built here based on their jealousy. And I don't know why there's nobody else out there saying that, because that's what I see in the fucking world when I see other people criticize us. I see jealous countries who have less and worse systems and are worse off in many different ways, yet seem to think that their principles work better than ours. Well, then I ask you, why is your country leading the world? They'll probably tell us it's because we don't have the military might you have. Yeah. You also want policemen, don't you? Yeah. How do you justify your country existing, NATO? Yeah. So I'd be real careful before you criticize the thing that's enabling your existence. Or at least if you're going to do it, make sure it's accurate. Anyway, that's my message to the world leaders right now. If you're criticizing the United States and it's not justified, go fuck yourself. Happy birthday, United States. And until next time, lots of love. I'll be back on her soon.